Trump has early signs of dementia. I'm not saying it's full-blown dementia, but he has early signs of dementia. And the media should have on, not me to talk about it, but mental health professionals on to talk about what they're seeing, because this man could be commander-in-chief. This is not a political issue. This is a real-life issue. And the voters should know. Trumpers don't care, but the rest of us should know, does he have early dementia, and where is this going? Will it plateau now, or will it get worse over the next 4 years if he's president? This should be part of the discussion. They did it to Biden, but they're not doing it to Trump.
Welcome back to Just the Facts with me, the Watergate girl, Jill Wine-Banks, and today's guest, Dean Obeidallah. Dean is a unique combination. He is a comedian, a lawyer, and a serious journalist. He hosts the daily radio show. It's a political show called The Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progressive Talk Radio. And he writes a Substack newsletter, and it is terrific. I highly recommend it. It's called The Dean's Report. It's something that I read every day and think you should too. He's a frequent contributor to CNN, The Daily Beast, MSNBC, which is where we became friends. I am so excited to be talking to him. He grew up in New Jersey, was born to parents who were his father was Palestinian, his mother's parents came from Sicily. He practiced law for about 5 years, and while he was practicing law, he did his first stand-up comedy routine for the New Jersey Bar Association. He then joined Saturday Night Live as a researcher and continued to perform stand-up comedy. So I'm excited to talk to him today about a very important subject, and that is the press coverage of Donald Trump's declining physical and mental capacity, maybe something we could even call dementia, and the lack of coverage of all the positive things that Kamala Harris is promising and has done. It's not fair, and I want to talk to him about how the coverage is going, both in terms of its quantity and its quality. Let's get going. Welcome, Dean. I'm very excited and delighted to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me, Jill.
It's great. As I said in my introduction, I loved your Substack report about what's happening in terms of press coverage of the campaign, and probably many other things, but let's focus on the campaign. And I want to start because the premise of your piece, which was called Corporate Media is Back to All Trump All the Time, just like in 2016. And that title really captures the problem that we're having. You make it clear that you think that cable news and newspapers and magazines and everything online are devoting too much time to Trump and not enough time to Kamala. And I would say that they are doing it in a negative way when it comes to reports on Harris and a positive way, sane washing, when it comes to Trump. So you talk about that in your piece, and just tell our audience exactly what you're talking about and give some examples of why you think this is happening and some examples of it happening.
Well, everyone knows it. I mean, everyone listening to your show, I'm sure, Jill, is very aware of what we're seeing go on in the media right now. And it started before Vice President Harris became the nominee. There was a negative articles about Joe Biden all the time, quantified by Media Matters, which showed they would mention Joe Biden's age and mental acuity issues and not mention Trump. And it was so horribly disproportionate. Then after Biden left, I will say the first 4 or 5 weeks of the Vice President Harris campaign, she was setting the media agenda. She was everywhere. And what we did see, and went right to the first debate, through the DNC to the first debate, she got a really good bump after that first debate. And that's when the media began to turn. And they went back to their old ways, which is all Trump all the time. And sometimes they have to cover Trump. You know, Trump over the weekend saying he thinks the army should go out to go after the enemy within, which he defined as radical left lunatics, which would be me and you. You know, like this demands attention. And sometimes he does it to manipulate, but sometimes you have to cover it. But other times with Vice President Harris, you know, people over the weekend like, why isn't she doing more events? She was in North Carolina doing events. Corporate media chose not to cover it. The point is, it's not like she's sitting at home watching television. But if you watch corporate media, that's what you would get the sense of, because everything is Trump, 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 Trump. And many times the headlines are sane washing, as you said. This is a man, I've had experts on my show who are mental health professionals. I've cited them in articles I wrote for an article that was a medical publication ran. Trump has early signs of dementia. I'm not saying it's
Yes.
full-blown dementia, but he has early signs of dementia. And the media should have on, not me to talk about it, but mental health professionals on to talk about what they're seeing, because this man could be commander-in-chief. This is not a political issue. This is a real-life issue. And the voters should know. Trumpers don't care, but the rest of us should know, does he have early dementia, and where is this going? Will it plateau now, or will it get worse over the next 4 years if he's president? This should be part of the discussion. They did it to Biden, but they're not doing it to Trump. Trump is, there are so many classic signs of dementia going on, and even his energy level is way off. There is
Yeah.
something deeply wrong with him. We don't see it. And corporate media is like, we're not doctors. So to me, you got the sane washing, you've got the ignoring. Mostly it's the ignoring of Harris, less than the negative stories. Every now and then you see negative framing. It's pushed her out of the media, and there's a real world impact, Jill.
So,
After the
well,
debate, she got a big. Okay, go ahead. So
yeah,
what
no,
you tell?
I just was going to say, from your Substack, there are a lot of facts, but I want to talk about some of the things you just said, and then we'll get to some of the Substack facts.
Sure.
It's not just, I perceive the coverage as negative and positive. I view the sane washing, and let me explain to the audience exactly what I mean. What I mean is, for example, when he spoke to the to the New York Economic Club, and he answered a question about childcare in what I can only describe as gibberish. Now, I'm not saying it's mental lapses, although it seems to be, but that's not important. What matters is that he can't string together a sentence. He can't string together a paragraph. He wanders in his mind, and nothing he says makes sense. And the New York Times actually reported sort of like, well, I'm sure this is what he meant. And they talk about that when it isn't what he said. And all voters need to see how he would be talking in private negotiations. And they're not doing that. And I think that's extremely dangerous. I want to be able to vote based on, as you said, he has to get covered. He is a candidate for president, and people need to know what it is he's saying. But they need to, and we'll get to the headline part, which, I don't blame the journalists for that, because headline writers write those. The person who wrote the article doesn't. But it doesn't reflect what's in the article. And so there's a quantity difference. You point out that he got like $5 billion worth of free media coverage. He sucked the air out of every other opponent, whether it was Biden originally or Harris now. And that's incalculable. But that's because the quantity was so much. But it was also, if you look at the headlines, and in addition to your Substack, there was a Substack written by Margaret Sullivan, which gives some specific examples that she presented to her students at Columbia, my alma mater, although she's in the journalism school, I was in the law school, that really lay out how they are portraying the things that he's saying versus the things that she's saying. So talk about those kind of specific things.
Look, you've got, for me, it's less the specificity of the headlines. Like certain people look at that. I look at the fact that the media coverage is a finite landscape. We all get that. So if you're covering Trump, you're ignoring Harris.
Yes.
And what I mean in the real world that it matters, after the debate, she got a bump, 4 or 5 points. We saw an NBC poll, 5-point bump. Now the new poll, it's dead even, right? I don't think it's dead even in real life, but I do think that it's gotten closer. That's true. What happened? Everyone watching the debate, they got to like her more. They got to know her more. Don't forget, people don't know her well. There was no primaries that they got to know her. They saw they liked her. Then from that debate on is when the media shut off the Harris faucet, turned on the Trump faucet, and the gap closed. And I was watching it close. And there's a direct correlation between her not being in the media, him being everywhere. It makes him look omnipotent. It makes him look invincible on some level and stronger and bigger. He's everywhere. And they're debating. Trump said this. Did he say that? And back and forth panels. She's ignored like she doesn't matter. To me, that's the problem. As more people see her, they like her. And so right now, all she's being defined by is negative campaign commercials that Trump and his super PACs are running the battleground states nonstop. She's not getting the coverage. To me, one of the greatest failings of the media as well is not pressing Trump for a second debate. This is outrageous. If Harris would not do a second debate, had canceled a 60 Minutes interview like Donald Trump did, I have no doubt corporate media would have been like, why are you not doing this? Because we know they would have done that because they were pressing Harris to do more interviews. And then when she did the interviews, they didn't like the interviews. They wanted the interviews in their places. Or I want her on my radio show. We all want her in our places. Stop whining.
She's invited
about it.
to my show too. She can come on Just the Facts.
Right. So that's the truth. So you've got, to me, it's not about a specific headline. Although over the weekend on New York Times, like 3 articles in a row online, every one about Trump. And there were negative ones about Harris. Why is she losing Black and Latino votes? And when you look at it, they're citing their own poll. But when you look at the CBS poll that came out the same day, she's got the exact same support of Black voters that Joe Biden did in 2020, 87%, exactly the same. So the New York Times makes their news with their polling, which I think has some faulty issues to it. I really do.
So why do you think that is, though? Why do you think the press is doing? No, why is the press polls we could talk about forever because I don't believe in any of the polls. And look what happened with Hillary. She was going to win for sure. I was at a celebration party when suddenly
I was at the Javits Center that night for the celebration to cover it. I'm like, this is not a celebration. God.
Okay,
this is not good.
Let's talk about why the press would do this. Why would basically every media, whether it's the New York Times, whether it's my own MSNBC, NBC, why are they doing this?
Well, all of the ones you mentioned and the big ones, CNN and of course Fox News, they are for-profit businesses, right? They are for-profit, generally publicly traded corporations. The executives there have a mandate to make as much money as possible for the shareholders. We know that. How do you do that? More ratings equals more revenue. More clicks equals more revenue. That is the deciding metric. Now, there are journalists who are great within those worlds, but they must navigate a world where the executives above them dictate what's going to be the tone. I mean, we know at big cable networks, often they have daily meetings that morning with the executives talking about what are we going to talk about. They're not telling the anchors what to say. They're saying today it's going to be all impeachment, let's say, or something like that, or something that you've worked on. Or that makes sense. It might be today. So when you watch MS, which I love, and there's some great journalists, you'll notice a lot of times, even on MS, which we love, it's not pro-Harris coverage, it's anti-Trump. So they've still squeezed Harris out. And people are not getting to know her proposals. They're not getting to know the earned income tax credit or $25,000 to help people buy their first home. And the list goes on, $50,000 for small businesses to have change the tax deduction for it. And you go down the list and her track record. So what you don't hear is about her. You hear negative Trump. And everybody knows everything there is to know about Trump. We've lived with this guy. Jill, he's aged me. Look at me. I'm 23. Look what he's done to me. So he's aged the crap out of me. I'm not 23. But the point is, he's aged all of us.
That's the comedian in you coming out, isn't it?
Right. But Jill, I wrote an article for Substack a month ago looking at 2 studies done by focus groups, left-leaning focus groups. Yeah. And they said to move truly undecided voters or people who were on the edge, showing them negative Trump stuff did nothing. They knew everything about Trump. Showing them positive Harris stuff, that's what moved them. So that's the mandate for us who want Harris to win, is to talk about the positive things about Vice President Harris. That's what moves these voters. We know Trump is a nightmare. The man attempted a coup, incited a terrorist attack, has vowed to pardon the terrorists, convicted of 34 felonies for cheating in the 2016 campaign, an adjudicated rapist, an open white supremacist who mocks disabled people for fun and for sport, who makes cruelty part of the currency of the GOP. Everyone knows that. You know that. I know that. And the people on the right.
And so do his followers. That's the problem. There are millions of people who are believing him and know that. But you're getting to the solution, which is, I think, really important, because I don't know whether the media has changed because they get more viewers and that's important to them, or because they are big corporations and they'll benefit from his tax cuts for the rich. But whatever the reason is, it is more dangerous now than it was in 2016. And, when we compare 2016, that the $5 billion in free media coverage he got, that's more than if you combine Hillary and Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz and Paul Ryan and Marco Rubio. All of those together got less coverage than he did alone. And so who cares why? It's happening. It's a reality. So what do we do? Because facts matter. And you were just talking about the only facts that seem to move people are getting out the true facts, the positive facts about Harris. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we do that? How do we get the media to cover that? You know, we're saying it here, but that's not reaching a big enough audience. What's the message that needs to get out? You've said positive truth
Right.
about
That's
what her policies are. But how do you
Mhm.
get it to the audience that needs to get it? Not to the Trumpers, because they're lost probably forever, but certainly for this election and probably the next. But what about those old-fashioned GOP, the people that I used to be able to have a conversation with about policy? We agreed on the facts. We didn't agree on what solved the problem. But how do we get to those people and independent voters? And more people are identifying as independent now than ever before.
Well, look, part of it, Jill, is going to be the Harris campaign themselves, and they're getting out there. She does events. The one thing that we don't see is the local press she gets. When I talk to local elected officials or county Democratic chairs in battleground states, we'll talk about media coverage, and they'll say, "Well, it didn't get CNN coverage or MS, let's say, it got a lot of local press." So she's getting the press in the
Yeah.
battleground states. That's one thing. And they cover it because she's a big star. It's like when Trump comes, Trump gets the coverage too. We all understand it.
Yeah.
He also gets the national coverage she doesn't get. Like he has a rally in California. Everyone knew about it, got national coverage. She did a rally in North Carolina last.
Yeah.
She's doing events this week. Every day she's got rallies. Let's see if the media covers that. So partly it'll be her campaign, partly being creative. I think there's a multifaceted approach. Another is that we have to call out the media for their bias. The right has done that long time. They've worked the referees forever. And what did Democrats do?
Yeah.
We defended the media because we understand there's a value to it. We understand it's the fourth estate. So Trump would be like, it's the enemy of the people. And we're like, it's not. It's the greatest thing. But then I was trying to convince people for years. I even wrote about it for MSNBC 3 years ago. They let me write an article criticizing corporate media in corporate media.
Wow.
That the idea of telling Democrats, you have to learn a lesson from the right. Call out the coverage when it's bad because it has an impact. Because again, it's about ratings and revenue, right? So if we're like, we're not going to watch it, we're not going to subscribe, it can have an impact. So that's part of it. But I also think it's about education in the bigger picture of all of this. If you see Harris, she's losing white voters, but winning white voters with a college education. She's picked up, there was an article in the New York Times or Washington Post just today, Black and Latinos, while she's losing some, she's picking up more who have college degrees. So the idea, and I'm not saying you have to have a college degree. If you don't want to go to college, that's your choice in life. But
I headed up career and technical education for the Chicago Public Schools. I am a big believer that college is not for everyone, and it's not necessary for everyone. And also we underestimate the education level of plumbers and electricians, et cetera, et cetera. But that's a difference. That'd be a good topic. We'll have to talk about that sometime. But
to me, it's about critical thinking skills, right? So it's about, I just had an expert on my show last week, and I went through it on my show. I beg people on the left, I tell them, people send me emails, look at this, Dean, and it's their friend's blog. I'm like, there's no fact checking here. You understand, just because you agree with it doesn't mean it's true. Don't fall down the same rabbit hole they did. I beg people, Google it. Look at credible sources like NBC News, ABC News. Look at more than one. Look at BBC. Don't because your friend sent you a blog or someone wrote their own blog on Substack. I put so many links in all my articles that I encourage people, click on the links, read the source article so you understand the facts. Critical thinking is the key, the antidote to the misinformation of the GOP. That's a long-term investment.
Go to Snopes.com and check out what's true and what isn't true. And make sure you have more than one source. And if you read online, as I do, although I still get a physical newspaper, I click on the links because it's not enough. I can't go on television and comment on an indictment if I haven't read the indictment. So don't take a reporter's view of what the indictment says. Skim through the indictment yourself. And the same thing is true on all these other facts. Critical thinking skills is really, really important. Let me ask you about a different thing because, as you know, I used to do a podcast called iGen Politics with Victor Shi. And we had this, and you were a guest on our show more than once. And it was a perspective of a college student who is now graduated and working for the Biden campaign. So we're not doing the show while he's working for the campaign. And of an older version, almost a baby boomer. And we talked about the fact that the media that his generation reads is not the same as what I read. It's not the New York Times and the Washington Post. It's not the Chicago Tribune. It's not the Detroit News. It's TikTok. And so I think one of the things that Harris has done is to, at the convention, there was a whole section of influencers, and they had their own special media room. They were up front at the convention because she knows that to get her message out to younger voters, she has to use social media. Has that been effective?
I think very much so with younger people. I've had many, many Gen Z people on. I used to have Victor on, but now he's inside the campaign.
Right.
I had one of the influencers on several times who was there in the DNC. I've had numerous Gen Z activists, from Voters of Tomorrow to Dylan Douglas, who's a new addition here at SiriusXM. I'm on SiriusXM. He's on the weekends now. Many, many Gen Z activists, men and women, they get so much of their news from non-traditional sources. It's peer-to-peer. They trust their peers. They trust other young people talking to them about the issues. And yes, you could be misled, but hopefully you're picking sources that are earning your trust. So it is TikTok. It's social media. It's Facebook. Facebook's who's a little older. It's going to be Instagram. Yeah, Instagram. Like I only use Facebook to post things, not about my age. I just know it doesn't reach people like it used to at one point. Instagram reaches people who are younger and even a little bit older. Instagram is more of a broad scope of people. But look, young people are going there. They're getting their news. I hope for many of them, it's the beginning of the journey on a topic, not, I learned it in 1 minute. I got all the facts.
Yeah.
Like,
and
you
and
can't.
also it's not fact-checked. It is not fact-checked. And so it's no more reliable than any other social media or any other single source. You must fact check. And then, for example, the vice presidential debate was not fact checked because the candidate wouldn't do it from the Republican side unless they agreed not to fact check. And the reason supposedly that Donald Trump wouldn't do the 60-minute interview is because they wouldn't agree not to fact check, and he wouldn't let them fact check. So, if by any chance you happen to have stumbled upon this show, not knowing that it was Dean and me, both progressives, and you are listening, just remember that you need more than one source, and that it isn't true, as Dean just said, it's not true just because your friends said it. You have to check it out. Is there any message that you have for our listeners, or like, how would you phrase the message that's positive about Kamala? What would you want someone from Fox News to hear about her?
I would have to say she aspires to be a president for all people, which I think is very important. As much as I'm a progressive and I would like her to just be the progressive Democratic leader, while Donald Trump wants to only be a leader of his base, right? And Donald Trump is divisive by design. She's embracing people. Her idea of turn the page and we're going to go forward, we're not going back, is vitally important. This election is really a contest between, should we continue down the path to be a multiracial democracy or move back to a time where Trump and some of his supporters, not all, but some, want pre-1964 Civil Rights Act, pre-1965 Voting Rights Act, where it really is white power.
How about just those acts being enforced instead of being torn down by Donald Trump and the Supreme Court?
Certainly. So some of them want to go back to a different time. Some of the wealthy ones, I don't know where they stand on the cultural issues, but you mentioned about lower taxes. They also want less regulations, and they want the ability to have more monopoly. So they want to be able to do more mergers. But the FTC under Joe Biden has been really aggressive and downright hostile, they say, like in economic publications, to mergers. Well, mergers are great for the business, but bad for consumers. So for me, what Vice President Harris is going to fight for the middle class, fight for the lower class to move to the middle class. She does it through proposals on everything from earned income tax credits to first-time home buyers, to small business, for people with small business, to lowering costs, expanding Medicare now to home health aides to cover that, which had been so life-changing for my late mom, because that was a big expense in our family. So there's a whole list of things that it's like Biden, but I think a little better. And also an area like the Middle East, which is important to me and many people, I think she'll be more balanced, which hopefully will bring us to a just peace deal, as opposed to the approach that's gone forward has not been working for either Israelis or Palestinians or anyone in the region, frankly. You can only be one side for too long. It emboldens the worst instincts that we see, like in Netanyahu. It emboldens worst instincts, as opposed to knowing, hey, we're going to work with both sides. We see humanity in both. I think just today or yesterday just was critical of Netanyahu not allowing food into northern Gaza for 2 weeks. That was citing the UN for that. So look, I think there's a lot of issues. She's vastly different from Donald Trump in so many ways, but I think she is the future of this nation. I think she's ready to take us the next step as we move forward as a people, a multicultural, multiracial democracy, embracing of all, giving everybody a chance, fighting for all people.
There's at least 100 facts that I would want our listeners to know, because in the end, she's the one who will be better for them. And if we look historically, the economy has been great, much better now than it was under Trump, much better in general historically under Democrats than it is under Republicans, for the people. Oh, and maybe that's a good phrase for her, for the people, Kamala Harris. It's really true that the facts should matter, and I'm hoping people listening today are getting those facts and understanding that they must pay attention to them and must pressure all of their local media and the national media to cover fairly. Maybe we can just end with talking about the headlines, because most people skim and they think they get the gist of the story from the headline. Let me start by saying headlines are written by headline writers who supposedly have read the article, but if you compare the headline to the substance of the article, oh man, it doesn't reflect it. And so what can we do about that? People, you have to read at least several paragraphs and maybe the last paragraph. You can't just read the headline.
Just don't, please don't. I mean, I've written for years I used to write for CNN for years. I write for MSNBC and Salon and others. And there are times I'll look at the headline and I will grimace. I'm like, why did they do that? And other times I'm like, I love the headline. I know it's going to get clicks. It doesn't really reflect the article, but from just a point of view, it's going to get a lot of people looking at it. I'm happy with it. The headline is written to be the most provocative possible. It does not say what the article's about. I think it's important, like you're saying, read the article. I know everyone's busy. Not everyone's got time to read every article out there. But I think for me and Jill, we're both lawyers. I tell people on my show and even my articles, I will never make up facts, because I come to the world as being a litigator. I couldn't make up my facts. I would take the facts and make the best argument based on the real facts. That's how I approach my articles. That's how I approach my radio show. I'm not going to leave out the bad facts. I'm going to address them in a way to make it clear. I know what the bad facts are, but this is why our facts are even better. And it's just like a litigator going to court. It's what you do, because I want people to know the facts and then be able to make the arguments on their own. I have right-wing people call my show and don't want to sort of debate an issue. And you understand in a minute that their understanding of the facts are very, very narrow, because they've just been told it from Fox News or Donald Trump. And the minute you ask a probing question, they move the goalposts or they switch topics because they can't address it. And that shows you how people are being misled. To me, Jill, one of the greatest crimes of Trump is misleading otherwise good Americans who would have been good, patriotic Americans. They would have been defending our republic, defending our democracy. Trump has made them believe that there was fraud in 2020. They're supporting a guy who attempted a coup. If you asked them years ago, would you support a presidential candidate who attempted a coup and incited a terrorist attack and then pledged to pardon the terrorists? They would say, of course not. But Trump has misled them to that point. So my big plea to people is know the facts. Don't ignore the facts. When there's some facts that aren't good for you, make the best argument you can based on the real facts. That's how we win the day in the long run.
Yeah. The other problem the press is having is they are equalizing. They're sort of putting, if you put headlines side by side, it's not even both sides. It's taking an insane gibberish statement and making it sound like it's something and putting it side by side. I think in the Margaret Sullivan Substack, she mentions the headline about Trump goes on about the importance of genes when he was really talking about eugenics and Nazism. And they had an opposite headline about Harris that was negative, even though what she said was so good and so positive. And so they're treating his silliness as if it equates to a serious statement by a political candidate for president. And that does a disservice to his voters, not just to the people who want to see Harris win, but to the Trump people who are going to vote for him thinking that he was making sense when he wasn't. That to me is extremely dangerous. So, okay, so we want this show to get clicks. So what headline would you write for this show?
Donald Trump has dementia. Let us tell you how. That's the truth. I've heard many articles about his dementia. The guy's got red flag with dementia. Or, don't let the corporate media mislead you. Or it's time to call out the corporate media's pro-Trump bias. Just the facts, please.
It's so interesting because if you take, and maybe I'll put this in the show notes too. My producer sent a video, and it was on X, which I've stayed on because I think it's important that it not be taken over by the right-wing nuts.
I agree.
That there be some form there. And also because I get very good interaction with people who actually believe like I do. But he sent a video of someone impersonating Liza Minnelli reading Donald Trump's actual words. And I don't know whether they sound more insane coming from Liza Minnelli, partly singing them, partly saying them with her fabulous eyelashes painted on, or whether they sound more insane coming out of his mouth. To me, it's more insane coming out of his mouth. And I think we need to see more of that, where it's his actual words, not the sane-washing ones. So, okay, I don't know if I'm willing to go with dementia, but decay. He's certainly physically, his energy is down, his physical appearance is off, his activity level is down. I mean, as you said, Harris is out doing multiple things every single day. And where is Donald Trump? He's getting a lot of coverage for very little input. And that is something that I hope that this show can change, because facts matter. And we are just the facts. Thank you, Dean, for being with us. It's been
Thank you, Jill.
Great to talk. And you also had a Substack about Project 2025, and maybe we should talk about that on another show, because we're running out of time for you now. I know you have to prepare for your Sirius XM show, and I don't want to hold you back from that as much as I could keep you here all day talking. But
thank you. It's always great chatting with you, though.
Thank you so much. And I hope that all of our viewers will look at your Substack and subscribe to it and listen to your radio show every day. I consider them both mandatory. Thank you very much.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, Joe.